It's tough working in the education and nonprofit space right now. Like a lot of industries, the last few years have been chaos. But unlike a lot of those industries, teachers, nonprofit workers, they've had the added responsibility to show up. After all, that's what happens when your work is so focused on helping people in need. So they did what they had to do. They showed up. They dealt with the struggles of remote learning, shifting class sizes, and everything else that came from the past few years, but doing so day after day in spite of everything else going on, that took a toll. Burnout became a major factor, and with it, resignations and absences, short-term, long-term. All of that translates to larger class sizes, more people that you're serving, and then that pressure continues to build. It became a feedback loop, and more stress led to more staff shortages led to more stress. Now you look at teachers and nonprofit workers and they're overworked, they're under-equipped, and they need a way to take back control. Control in their lives, their work, their ability to help people in need. After all, that's why many workers got into the education and nonprofit spaces, was to help people. But unfortunately, you can't help others until you can help yourself, and while institutions may not be able to make more teachers and more employees appear with, well, a snap of the fingers, with the right digital tools, they may be able to put plans in place to ensure a sense of stability and support for employees, even in the face of short staffing crises. This is Transformation at Work, your one-stop guide to Salesforce success. The show is brought to you by Jarrett, a summit-level Salesforce consulting and implementation partner and solutions provider, and I am Jeff Stormer, your host as always. In this episode, we're looking at the short staffing crisis in education and nonprofit and asking the question, can digital tools help educators achieve some much-needed peace of mind? Joining us this episode are April Bolwage, Jarrett's Senior Director of Education, and Richard Carter, Jarrett's Director of K-12 Education. April and Richard both bring years of experience to the table. Richard from his time working as a middle school principal, his higher education experience at Rider and Princeton, and a year spent as an elementary school principal, and April from 20 plus years of international education experience, coupled with a lifetime spent with a family full of teachers and a Catholic school principal for a grandmother. They've both seen firsthand the incredible commitment that educators and nonprofit workers bring to the causes that they support, and how digital tools can help them streamline processes and get back to what matters, the people that they serve. We begin our conversation by digging into the issue at hand and asking the question, what has led to the unique staffing challenges in the education and nonprofit space, and how do those challenges affect the institutions themselves?
I think it's pretty much in line with most industries where we're seeing lots of people making changes in their career, reevaluating their life's work and their life's decisions on what makes them happiest and what's the most productive use of their time. And for sure, having seen the changes in education as a result of the pandemic, the changes in learning styles, the reality of what it means to be a teacher in the classroom or a support staff in the classroom has really been, bubbled up to the top for most people to see in a way they hadn't in the past. And we're faced with a really unique challenge in this space in education and nonprofits similarly, because we're in an area where people join this industry or call to this industry because they want to help people. They want to get involved. They want to teach. They want to make something better. They want to help. They want to give back. And they're faced in a situation where, sometimes that love isn't enough, right? What can I do to make this a better life for myself where I'm happy and content and I feel like I'm able to do those things? And people are finding that they can't. They don't have the tools they need to be successful in those roles, which causes challenges and questioning of their decisions to really want to help people. So it's kind of twofold, I think, in a lot of areas. People, you question why you made the decision to get somewhere. But here, you were driven for a reason. You were brought somewhere from a place of good, and you're having that question. So I think it's a philosophical place where maybe in some other industries it's not. But here it's really specific as to how can I do what I love the most and how can I give back when there's so many things stacked against me, and the chips really are just kind of sometimes on the other side of that table.
Now, those staff shortages can have a profound impact on an institution's ability to do good over time, as Richard breaks down here.
As far as the unique challenges that are faced by K through 12 educators due to the increased turnover rate, you have fundamentally an exodus of institutional knowledge. Best practices in successful schools are predicated on knowledgeable teachers, experienced teachers leading the way, especially as it relates to incoming teachers. And leading the way, meaning understanding how the school year calendar actually works in real time. When are the periods of time during which specific competencies need to be stressed? How do the breaks impact student retention, et cetera, and so forth? So when you have turnover, especially turnover of experienced educators, you lose a lot of wisdom.
But it's not just the institution that suffers when it comes to staff shortages. Unfortunately, that impact almost always ripples back out to the communities that these institutions serve.
You also put students in a very precarious position because with this turnover comes a loosening, I think, of the pillars of the community of learners that the most successful schools exemplify and live out. Clearly, with COVID-19 and other stressors that have impacted the K through 12 environment and other environments for that matter, you have a tremendous amount of learning loss that was just caused by the difficulty that many school communities faced with regard to remote learning. And then when you add this exodus, if you will, of teachers, it sets students back in terms of their achievement. And unfortunately, there is strong evidence pointing to this reality.
Exacerbating these challenges is the very simple and very understandable fact that due to many institutions' laser focus on their communities, they often lack the technology in place to effectively establish a backup plan in the event of a staff shortage.
Everybody knows this is happening. I don't know anybody you can ask a question to saying, hey, how's staffing in any industry in the world right now? Everybody knows things are kind of upside down, but there are usually backup tools. And in education and nonprofit, unfortunately, a lot of the investment isn't made into technology and into tools for people because you're so busy helping people all day. It's how do we fix a problem? A lot of band-aiding solutions because you have to, because you have students in front of you, because you have people in a nonprofit program that you're serving. I don't have time to go in and look at a new system. I don't have time to do this because I need to help. They're right in front of me. They need my help right now. So I think taking time to take a step back and looking at the tools that are available to people will make them feel a bit more supported, to have a little bit more, some access to information and to tools that'll serve them to help them serve the people that they really are intending to reach out to and help.
That lack of preparedness on the institution's part often ends up directly on the shoulders of already overworked teachers and nonprofit employees.
I think you also put stress on the environment when you have increased turnover and staffing related issues, because then you have a core group of teachers, presumably, who are attending to their professional responsibilities regularly, upon whom tremendous amounts of stress are placed because someone has to cover the classes on a day-to-day basis when teachers are absent. I know of a district local to me that averages, at least in the secondary school level, about 15 absences of faculty a day. Substitute services can't accommodate that load, especially when these absences are fairly widespread. And that means that you have to focus on internal coverage. It's a morale lessener if you are forfeiting your opportunity as a teacher to prep for your classes to cover another person's class. It can be a very frustrating experience for the students because substitute teacher plans aren't designed to carry the day. They're just meant to, I think, keep students afloat. They're not designed to push students forward. You have dynamics between students and teachers that become frayed as well, i.e. student behavior or misbehavior, because they don't have a consistent voice or presence in the classroom. And it's just a range of issues, a domino effect, if you will, that has a deleterious impact on the ecology of the schooling system once you have, these increased turnover rates and staffing related issues.
Now here, as April lays out, is where digital tools can immediately come in handy. They give institutions the crucial ability to put backup plans in place for when staffing shortages happen and employees are stretched thin.
I think where technology can really come in and play is that the sharing of information about not only roles, but about students, of course, in a secure way, that the right information is shared with the right people, but having access. If you think about an industry, let's say you go out to dinner and their wait staff is short because 2 waitresses called out. They're going to scramble. They're going to pull together. It's going to be a couple hours. It's a shift, right? Imagine that in a school. days after day after either people being sick, people calling out for whatever those reasons are, and then not having that backup staff or anyone to help. Imagine what that means for a child that goes to the nurse. Imagine what that means for someone who's in a different educational track and needs individualized learning, and they get a substitute for the day. How does that translate over? How does anyone know who that student is? How do they know what that person truly needs if they don't have access to information about them? And so many things, people get sick. There's not this robust backup staff of people to come in and jump in and pinch hit the way there had been in the past. And I think having access to information about what that person's role is supposed to do and who they're supposed to help is going to be the most critical to them.
By centralizing data on employee and teacher schedules, institutions can build reliable backup plans that ensure coverage is kept throughout the day, even when staff are absent.
Typically, one checks the schedule of the absentee teacher and correlates it to or compares it to the schedule of those teachers who are there, who have prep periods during the time when those absentee teachers are teaching, and someone sits and creates the matchups, the coverages. It would be interesting, I think, and helpful to have digital tools to track these different types of internal substitute coverage arrangements, meaning teachers who work in the building, who are covering classes, to share that information with the faculty in terms of being transparent about who's covering what and when, which could lead to the questions of why, and equity, meaning you don't always want to burden the same individuals, even if their schedules lend themselves towards such coverages. So I think digital tools could potentially offer a wealth of information that could help make the process an untenable process that is rooted in some type of equity.
But here's the thing. While the ability to form backup plans is incredibly valuable, it's ultimately only a stopgap solution, right? It may keep things running, but it doesn't address the core challenge that these institutions are facing. That being simply put, their employees are exhausted. They're burnt out. Here's how April puts it.
Yeah, I mean, burnout and exhaustion are really 2 points that hit the nail right on the head, especially in the education nonprofit space. It stinks because in this space, it's never been a level playing field, right? Because people aren't in education to make money. The organizations aren't nonprofit, they're the same. This is one way that organizations to take a step back and say, okay, look, let's look to see where, not industry trends, let's just see where humans are right now in the universe and what's important to them. I mean, so much is tied into mental health, self-care, and people just understanding what's most important to them and what is a healthy environment for them. And people know differently, and people, again, changed a lot because of what has happened in the past few years. But in the industry that is the definition of high touch, where you have to be completely on and completely warm and welcoming and your best self every day to make someone else's day better, going in a situation that you don't feel that you're supported, how can you support anybody else? How many days can you go in with being the substitute of a substitute of a substitute in a position and still feel like you're making a difference? Because then there's that frustration too. It's everything else aside, I have all the tools, I have everything, and I'm here, and I still don't feel like I'm making a difference. So now what am I doing with my life?
It's here we get to the real value that digital tools such as Salesforce can offer. And that is allowing for meaningful conversations about stressors and building real support networks for employees in need.
I also think that if stakeholders actually could talk about what's leading to multiple absences and have candid conversations about the stressors within the school building or school community environment that may be contributing to these absences or exodus, that would be useful for districts and parents to know. It would be helpful for educators to hear from parents regarding what they're seeing at home from their students, from their children as a result of this discontinuity of structure within schools. So I think that digital tools and information, if sensitively, thoughtfully considered, could provide a ground for rich conversations that are based on fact, or at least information that could lead us to fact, as opposed to accusations and broad statements that perhaps, if explored, aren't really productive. Oh, you really just don't want to be there. Oh, you really don't like your job. That's one type of statement. Help me to understand what it's like to be you as a professional, and how can I help? That's a different set of questions. By the same token, posing to parents, can you help us to understand how you're experiencing your children as students after a day at a building when you have mass absences, and how can we help? That would lead to a different set of questions as well. I think also that districts have a tendency to, or schools within districts have a tendency by and large to be siloed. And I think looking at the problem on a grander scale, meaning beyond individual school buildings, and thinking about what trends or tendencies exist within districts may be a unique way to solve it. In other words, maybe there are schools that you have faculty who are absent. Maybe they share common characteristics. Maybe there are certain days when teachers tend to be absent in a particular building. Is it possible to move teachers from building to building? Is it possible to think outside of the box, redefining school hours? I know we're talking about contracts and we'd have to resolve those types of issues, but I'm also thinking too that the wealth of data that one could collect on a school district might be able to identify unique solutions.
Ultimately, by streamlining data, automating processes, and building a real-time database of student and employee data, digital tools such as Salesforce Education Cloud and Nonprofit Cloud can eliminate some of the administrative hurdles and the day-to-day blues for employees and get them back to why they entered the field to begin with: helping the people that they serve.
The easier access that professionals have to significant information about the students, the faster that they're able to dispense with some of the more logistical, organizational responsibilities of understanding who's present, who's absent, who's late, et cetera, and just focusing on the business of educating, the art of educating and moving students forward. I'm thinking that within schools, you have wonderful staff members in the form of guidance counselors, for example, who could play a role in expediting some of these matters if they had access to digital tools that would allow the teachers to focus more on planning and instruction. So I think it's really a matter of identifying the stores of information that would help faculty move away from more of the inputting managerial duties to give them more time to actually focus on student engagement. Having school communities express or articulate what their individual processes are, I think would be a key step. And then matching those processes up with systems that could help, facilitate them and manage them more efficiently, I think would be key. So although I'm sure that one could come up with some general responses, I would also imagine that some processes are relatively idiosyncratic to buildings. All that being stated, if the buildings had access or ready access to stores of information, then I think that then those challenges could be addressed. I know, for example, of a wonderful non-teaching assistant who is worth his weight in gold, who instinctively, it was one of the many times that I was thankful that he and I were in the same building. There was an occasion where we knew that there would be a large number of teachers absent. And that meant in that particular time and context, that was, let's say, 9 years ago or so, that meant maybe 5 teachers absent. What this gentleman did, we'll call him Kerry, what Kerry did was he assembled those students who had a tendency to get into disciplinary issues when their routines were disrupted, let us say. And he gathered them in a room and he spoke with them about coming to him should there be any issues throughout the course of the day, and gave them all passes. And to do so, by the time that I got to the building, he'd already accomplished this. I was going to suggest that he do something similar, but he beat me to the punch by far. I'm wondering what happens if Kerry has access to tools that allow him to identify these students even faster than he did, to see their schedules, at the flip of a switch, to understand where they may be struggling or where they may be succeeding, and figuring out too, let's say in collaboration with guidance, what a special schedule might look like for a student who needs teacher support in order to thrive, won't have it because 1 or 2 of her teachers won't be in the building. And rather than risking that student getting into a disciplinary matter, which not only takes the student away potentially from instruction, but it also takes the administrative team or the administrator who needs to investigate the particular incident, should there be a disciplinary incident, then contact family members, then dispense discipline, et cetera, and so forth. having none of that time being used for discipline, but all of it being used to support children, that's a game changer. And what happens if this particular group of adults who looks at this information is able to identify patterns in terms of seeing which students tend to thrive with which teachers or which substitutes or internal coverages within the building? And why not have days, for example, where a student perhaps who would benefit from additional counseling spends an additional period of time above the norm if multiple teachers are going to be out with guidance? Or maybe that might be an opportune time to call a parent or guardian and speak with the parent and guardian about the child's progress in general, being sure to emphasize the highlights and then point out areas in need of improvement. Or thinking about which students actually ate breakfast, in that particular morning, which students are registered for free and reduced breakfast but didn't show up for breakfast that day. And maybe we spend some time with them in the cafeteria, making sure that they're nourished. Okay, we lose instructional time for the first period or first half of the first period, but what we gain in terms of the child being nourished throughout the course of the day is more than in an even trade. So I think that you could depend upon special people like Carrie to use creativity and innovation to organize students, or you could equip the Carries of the world and those who are like-minded with a plethora of information that allows them to come up with plans that envelop the child in the most positive of senses.
Going beyond just empowering current employees, when you eliminate some of that administrative burden and let team members focus on helping people, you start to create entirely new groups of, as Richard puts it, carries, those exceptional workers who act as the heart of an institution.
Maybe you have professionals who are on the cusp of realizing they could do far more because they're more than capable of accomplishing such. And as you said, you give them tools that would facilitate that development. And then it's just a matter of, from a leadership point of view, sharing with them what needs to be done, as opposed to telling them what to do, and allowing them to soar, and in turn having the students soar, because this teacher now can focus on being creative. This professional can now focus on being innovative in a particular way that specific information would allow one to be.
In turn, once those employees are working towards their goals again and not losing all of their time to the administrative work, that's when another key aspect comes into play: stakeholder feedback.
I think in this space in particular, it's absolutely critical that people have the opportunity to use these tools, but they get some feedback on their work too. I think when you see that engagement starting to work, when the gears start to click and people start accessing your information and start clicking on your emails and reading the messaging that you send out, and you know that it means something because they click through and they did some things. When you get some validation on your work, we don't do enough of surveying of students, of parents, of employees, of people who are working towards these things, of people who are served by nonprofits. How did that program help them? Did it help them? Did it really give them what they were looking for at the end of that engagement with that nonprofit organization? Or did I come out of an institution and really not have the experience that I was looking for academically, or put me in a position where I'd be successful professionally? So that's from the quote unquote customer side, of the person they're serving on their constituents. But then you look at the other side. Did I as a person actually help anybody today? Did I get any feedback to say, yes, April did a great job to me, getting me the information I needed about my program, making sure I was connected with a counselor to get me the help that I needed? If there's nothing coming back to you also, you're losing some of that as well. It's just the nonstop of the grind and the work and the paperwork and the back and forth and all the things that have to get done in a day, but no carrot, you're doing great, no feedback. And I think if we could leverage some of the technologies for feedback as well, not only will it help people improve their programs and the offerings that they have for people, it's also so important that people know that they are still making a difference.
At the end of the day, by centralizing data on employees and students, institutions can make a crucial change for their employees, and that is getting them back to their jobs.
If you give people the tools they need to do their jobs, if you give them a way to connect with the people that are most important with them, they can then again feel fulfilled and feel like they're doing the job that they set out to do.
One of the tough things about working in the education and nonprofit space is that even when you're working towards a cause you care about, you only have so much to give. And so when times are chaotic and tough, as they are right now, in a word, It can be easy to try and push through the administrative work and the noise and the factors over the past few years which have massively disrupted your routine and try to muscle through to get to the work that matters, which ultimately, while well-intentioned, leads to burnout, staff shortages, and impacts the exact people and causes that you were fighting for. The reality is that's one of the biggest advantages digital tools have to offer. They streamline the administrative work, they automate processes, and they allow you to prioritize what really matters, serving the communities that you work for. By investing in the right technology, institutions can ensure that the energy that they have is given where it needs to be given. And that makes all the difference in the world. This has been Transformation at Work. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to April and Richard for your incredible insights. Transformation at Work is, as always, produced by Jarrett in collaboration with Salesforce. I am Jeff Stormer, your host and producer. If you enjoyed the show, consider leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify, or head to jarrett.com to sign up for email updates when we release new episodes. Until next time, thank you again for listening, and we hope to see you again soon.